I guess because nobody was asking a question, I was like, maybe I'll pop in. Let me take a second here.
Yeah, I mean, we're always like in infinite time and infinite space in a way. So it's like you know you could the speaking comes when the speaking comes. The mind thinks like I'm speaking and
Yeah.
I've got to speak now, which is really beautiful that the mind can think those things, but they're all coming from this infinite space. Like every thought that you have, every word that you speak is coming from this infinite space of being, of no-thing, of consciousness.
Mm.
It's so crazy being a
Yeah.
human because we've got this ability to have complex thinking, we're so prone to believing that thoughts are real, you know, and that what we're narrating ourselves is real. But really, speaking, every thought, every word that we utter is coming from this infinite space. It's not coming from you. Everything we see,
Mm.
everything we do is coming from the infinite, the non-divided.
Yeah, there's like I think maybe it's like exasperation with like acting and speaking from identification.
Yeah, but even the identification is coming from this infinite space. But I understand because the identification creates particular experiences that are rejecting this moment, saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not
Yeah.
enough, this isn't enough, I need something more. And that's an uncomfortable experience. But below that, so that's it's not really below, but that it's seemingly below, there is something that's not rejecting anything, that everything is appearing and disappearing from. Brian is absolute completion. Every part of every thought, of every positive function, negative function, creative function, uncreative function, self destructive, it's all coming from the infinite.
It also seems like it doesn't believe the Brian character.
Yeah,
Like it does it make sense? Like it laughs at the Brian character
yeah, yeah.
because it's just like the Brian character's full of shit.
And perfectly divine shit. Like Lisa's full of shit too. I'm not like like saying you're full of shit. Lisa's all of us as humans are full of shit. Like, yes, I really know
Yeah.
something about this life. Oh yeah? What do we know about this life? We're on a ball in the freaking infinite space rotating around a sun. Like, I mean, what the hell's all that about?
Yeah.
Then we
It
think we
makes no
know
sense.
something, yeah. And the universe is apparently constantly expanding, and time is very
Yeah.
confusing.
What's that about? Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that mean that we're always expanding as well? If the universe and we are the universe, does that mean like our bodies are gradually expanding as well? It does seem like it. Like if you go to old parts of England, and I'm sure the same of the Netherlands, that people were smaller before. Like the doors, the window, you're like, ooh, we have expanded.
Yeah, we're getting taller.
Yeah. And our stomachs, we have more food. I think our weight's expanded. You see, it's true. That's the infinite law. Everything is expanding. Why, we do not know.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if there is a question here, um, I just don't want to ask the question, from like contraction or
Yeah,
from
yeah,
identification. That
yeah.
just feels, you know?
Yeah, you can wait for it. Like, wait for something to just pop.
Yeah. Mm.
And I just have something else to say about the separation of the mind. Like there's a part that doesn't take it serious, and this is really beautiful, Brian. This is the process that's happening beyond you. So there is seemingly a separation of the mind. So the mind separates, and there's a part of the mind that knows the character, and then there's another thing that's happening simultaneously to that. Is there's something seemingly recognizing that something's also watching the mind, which is separating. So there's like these seeming three things that are happening. And then you could say there's a fourth thing that's like there's a dropping into the body, dropping into sensation. So coming out of a very mental, mind-orientated experience to having emotions and not running away from the emotions. They're not the enemy. And it's all happening in the end by itself, just like the sun shining, the river running. But it feels like to the person at times like I'm orchestrating this, I'm going on this spiritual journey, I'm doing this.
Yeah, it feels very, very good to be reconnected with the body.
Yeah.
It seems like that's what, I've been running away from.
Yeah.
It's the emotions and the feelings.
Yeah.
And then that expresses itself just in life as running away from situations, running away from living life. It's just a running away from feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's the question I had. Like what I was noticing today was just this being stuck in the story and in the head, and this trying to get out of it, and then added onto the story was this feeling of I have to drop into the body, and I didn't seem to be able to. It was just like the story seemed, the head stuff seemed so strong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and sometimes when it is really strong like that, it's sometimes better to do some sort of practice, even though that's the last thing that's wanted, and that's also God's will as to whether the practice happens. But doing some sort of when the mind's really hammering away, doing something very physical like yoga, breathing, the Osho stuff that we've done at retreats, the Osho can help break that mental stream. And then other times when it's more quiet, then there'll be a natural sinking more into the body. Like there might be the attention which says focused on the body, or the attention just naturally goes there. But when it is really busy, it's trying to force something to happen, it often actually makes the mind more adamant. But doing a practice also when the mind is really adamant is really hard, because it also doesn't want to do that. So even if the practice doesn't happen and you just have a day of the mind being really strong, that is perfect. Like there's no beating up there, there's nothing wrong there. That's part of the process, of the no process.
Yeah, that's a huge thing of the character here. Is just layers of beating itself up about different things,
Yeah.
And it seems to exasperate.
And it's absolutely not true. There isn't a Brian that's bad. There isn't a Brian that's done wrong. There isn't a Brian that's failing. This is not true. And I say that not as saying to you, you've got to practice this or you've got to do this. It's chipping away at this energy that's taking that to be some form of truth. Not all the time, but coming in and claiming that's a truth, and then having that intense emotion of shame, I presume, I am bad. Or guilt. I've done something bad.
Yeah, guilt and shame. And it seems to be when falling asleep, sometimes I can kind of get under these layers, and then I can feel the abandonment that's really there.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that I'm dropping into the body and feeling the emotions. And then, I've realized that maybe it's actually what's there might be much more direct and intense if it was really experienced than what the mind thinks is feeling the emotions. But this seems to be quite heady, actually, what I'm saying now. I don't know that that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I can actually feel some of the guilt and shame now. And I could see it too. Interestingly, the last time I spoke with you, I rewatched myself talking, and I realized in talking, I might be doing it now. I was trying to get out of the emotions, you know.
Yeah, that's really deep insight, Brian. It might sometimes we don't recognize that, like these types of things, like to be able to sense that and perceive that, like, and that's the seeking. You know, and it's like this agitation, this, and it can be stronger or less strong, of like not quite resting here, so then trying to fulfill the emotions, to not feel guilt, to not feel shame, to not feel bad. Well, sometimes it does the opposite, wants to feel bad, wants to feel shame, wants to, but it's this seeking.
Yeah.
It's not really a speaking from now, it's speaking from now, but through that filter of seeking that's trying to escape now. Because even that's also happening from this moment.
So where does that seeking come from? That's from identification.
Yeah, it's just from misidentification, the identification with thought, rather than the identification with what you truly are, which is beingness and consciousness, which isn't really an identification because it's what you are, but it's just saying that for simplicity's sake, it's a misidentification. And it happens most probably genetically, but also through family saying, you're Brian, you're Brian, you're Brian, and keep telling you the story that you are, and then a belief in that, and then all energy goes to thought. So it becomes obsessed with thinking. So like imagine if it became obsessed with smelling, like believing it was a smell, and then it's always trying to maintain a certain smell. It's like the sense of thinking, which is a sense, I would call a sense, an ability, becomes the center stage. That is who I am. And then it's constantly imagining itself, and then it's trying to be the perfect self that can be loved and can be safe. And then it's also imagining all the others as well, rather than that is a functioning that's appearing and disappearing that helps us communicate. And coming from this place of authenticity, of beingness, and then it's sort of coming out of there, and a character's appearing, but it's not coming from an illusion, it's coming from something deeper. That's hard to put into words without sounding a bit wonky.
Yeah, it's interesting because I live with my brothers, and that, I mean, it seems that the story here is like that makes it harder because there's re-identification with these old roles, and then there's even like a blaming of them, and like this hatred of like, oh, they made me identify, it's because I live here, it's because of these circumstances, and well, obviously that further, you know, deepens sort of like identification seemingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is not true. They don't make you identify. It's just that the patterns are strong there. You know, so it's like the reactions and the way of being something else is strong, and it's like a strong momentum to be Brian for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, which I could see how that's maybe an opportunity.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also noticed, like, you know, the things I'm saying, these stories I'm telling, you know, they're kind of like a form of victimhood and this like guilt and shame. like trying to take like on identification and like believe in itself and um yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because right now you don't have any brothers. Even when you're interacting with them, you don't have any brothers.
Yeah, there's no one there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, you know, I've been going to a lot of groups, interacting with a few teachers, and you know, getting some guidance and stuff. It seems like no matter how much I do that or how much I interact, um, there's still like, I don't know if this is human, like human loneliness or like aloneness. Like there's not quite a there's not quite a like a sense of like being able to belong or something. Yeah.
Mm. I would assume that that's a human dynamic.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's seeking. It could be a part of the character that appears. The seeking would be the wanting to avoid it. So when the loneliness appears, it's then trying to run away from it. You know, loneliness is an emotion that appears for us all.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and is there a way to like is there a way to speed up this like disidentification instead of like s- some of the stuff that's experienced? It's like, oh well, like there was a belief that I was beyond it, or you know, that it was already seen, or um, and then it pops up again, and it's like old stuff, and something reacts like, oh, I'm so sick of this. Like,
Yeah. It is. I mean, the
yeah,
answers that come are crass, as in like, you know, then nothing new. The answer that comes is, you know, it will speed up when time is seen not to exist. That's crass, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, I mean, it's really the truth. Like when you really see that there is no time in which the you can exist to be free in the future, then there'll be a total acceptance of the presence, the timelessness. So right now, there's not been a Brian that's, you know, had all these experiences. The Brian's not alive. What's experiencing this is this consciousness which is still and present. The Brian comes and goes in that and tells stories about itself, which help its survival to an extent. But the true experiencer is the consciousness and the beingness which is here and present.
No, and there's nothing wrong with any of this appearing, right?
No, nothing. Every part of Brian is perfection. Every part. Every part. Even the Brian that really believes that it's not. It's all coming from consciousness. Like in this moment, every thought of the victim or anything negative, I mean, and anything positive, is coming from that infinite space of what we are. That's nice. I have a friend that does this all the time.
Is that Harold?
Oh yeah.
He told me to do that.
I forgot that you knew every word.
Yeah, he's telling me to do that.
Now we've got all the people that are listening to talk doing it too. They're all saying, there's like an orchestra, all coming from Harold.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah. It's such a gift to sit with you right now. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure, Brian.
I would continue to sit here if it weren't for, the fact that you're doing a talk. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Yeah, lots of love. If you just mute yourself, that would be good.